it's painful for them to follow this rabbit hole down and be like, wow, maybe we're not the good guys. Maybe my government is in fact not looking out for my best interests or the best interests of the people of the world. When it's aggressively memory hold, like Vegas was, like both attacks on Trump have been, it's because it did not go according to plan.
The attempt to sweep it under the rug is a clear signal that there's something worth sweeping under the rug.
I don't think that's an accident. I think that they want this upcoming generation to not value what makes America so special, and in fact to hate it for it.
Do you think people are waking up quickly enough to these threats?
No.
No. Okay, so...
Definitely not. That's the main reason I said earlier that I don't think people are waking up fast enough, is because I very much do not want to see the violent tumult that is necessary for human beings to throw off the shackles of tyranny. And it seems as if we are kind of barreling towards that.
Yeah, well, amen to that. So you were just telling me offline that you've been doing a lot of work and content recently on the Trump assassination.
Yep.
Which I guess now there's been 2 assassination attempts.
2 official ones.
2 official.
Yeah.
I don't know much. I obviously heard about both of them, but I haven't looked into either one of them much at all.
Yeah.
So like, could you maybe give us a little background about what happened with attempt number 1 and attempt number 2, and then perhaps some context and color around how you see the motivations and such for that?
Sure. So about 2 months ago, there was the first attack, the very famous one, the fight response from Trump afterwards. That was, I believe his full name was Thomas Matthew Crooks, and he is a ghost. He's like basically had no internet profiles to speak of. Some accounts came out after the fact, but for a man in his early 20s to have such limited internet exposure is odd. And then on top of that, we still have no motive, and no one seems to care that we have no motive. We also have the rooftop from which he took those shots. I believe he got off 8 rounds, maybe 7. That rooftop was initially reported by the United States Secret Service that, in fact, they were using supplemental security detail. This story goes really deep, so cut me off at any point.
No, please.
They were using supplemental security detail because they don't have enough Secret Service agents for the detail on Trump, because he is not the President of the United States. He's not the First Lady. What happened was the very day, there's so much weirdness with this day. It's absolutely bizarre, but the very day of Butler, Pennsylvania, they actually pulled the regular detail that would be on Donald Trump to put it on Jill Biden, Joe Biden's wife, because she was doing some event not far away. So because of that, they supplemented with DHS, like Department of Homeland Security, which is under the purview of Alejandro Mayorkas, and local PD. So the perimeter, you would think, for any high-profile target like a former likely future president would be as far as a sniper could probably get him, right? Because you're trying to keep him alive, especially when you're doing an outdoor event, which this was. And it turns out that right after the attack happened, they said that they had relied on local PD to secure that rooftop. In the past week, it has now come out that, in fact, the local PD was told, we got it. Secret Service said that they had it. So Miss Cheadle lied, and I think she may have perjured herself, in fact. Well, this is all preliminary investigation, so we don't know for sure, but
Miss Cheadle is one of the Secret Service agents?
She was the head of the Secret Service. She resigned shortly after that failed assassination attempt. So I'm very skeptical as to how literally the best vantage point for a shot on a former and likely future president of the United States, how that rooftop stays unguarded entirely, and you have both sides pointing fingers at the other. To me, that screams inside job.
Wow.
Then we get into Florida, if you'd like.
Yeah, please. So that's the second. So when did that happen, and then when did the second one take place?
That one was, I believe, it was July 13th, so 2 months ago.
Yeah.
The Ryan Ruth attack, or attempted attack, it actually didn't end up being an attack, was a little over a week ago, and it's already memory hold, as if it never happened. I believe it was not this past Sunday, but the one prior. And this guy is the craziest character imaginable. I've been researching him extensively over the past week as part of doing Liberty Lockdown, as well as the show with Luke. And I can't tell you how spookified this dude is. I mean, so he's written books. He's been arrested over 100 times. He was charged with WMD charges for having a fully automatic rifle in 2002. Why that's a WMD, I have no idea.
Weapons of mass destruction charge?
Yeah.
Okay. I
Yeah.
didn't know,
I know.
an assault rifle was that.
Super, super strange. But on top of that, like he was holed up and basically sieged by police at one point in his life. As I said, over 100 arrests, never served any significant jail time. He also then traveled to Poland to then walk across the border into war-torn Ukraine to recruit. He was seen in an Azov battalion ad. He also his internet profile is in, I think it's either Farsi or Arabic, where he's recruiting former Afghan soldiers to go and fight in Ukraine in the Foreign Legion. I mean, this guy is behaving, and in those posts, he's saying, I can get you a passport, I think through Pakistan. I mean, this is like CIA all day. That's how it reads. He also comes across as a total lunatic. So maybe he's not CIA. Maybe he's just a crazy person that is going to Ukraine in the middle of a war. That's a distinct possibility. But anyways, 5th or 6th hole at this golf course, Trump goes there basically unannounced. And so I don't know how the hell this guy knew that he was going to be there. And he is sitting in the bushes for 12 hours.
Wow.
He's basically, camped out, creating like what amounts to a sniper's nest for 12 hours. Secret Service does not catch him. And then like right before Trump is going to get to that hole, allegedly one of the Secret Service agents sees the barrel of his gun sticking out of the bushes and they shoot at him. And he runs off, gets in his car, and only because an eyewitness caught his plates did they ever catch him. So totally bizarre.
Wow. So the guy never got a shot off at Trump. He was just
correct
aiming. Secret Service shoots at him. Then he runs off.
That's the reports. I mean, this is coming from the Secret Service, so I'm very skeptical of anything at this point, but that's what they're saying.
And did they catch the guy and like he's now behind bars?
Yeah.
Mugshot. Okay, the whole thing.
Yeah. He's arrested. He is, I would hope, being interrogated very heavily to see what his deal is. But, my deep concern is that they'll Epstein the guy, that they don't want him to talk, especially if he is connected anyway. But that's assuming that he is, involved with the federal government on some level. I can't prove that. I don't know.
Sure.
But his history seems to me that if you're arrested 100 times, WMD charges, all this crazy stuff, and you never serve serious jail time, there's a distinct possibility that you're an informant or an asset to some federal agency. The fact that he was able to travel abroad, given his all these felony charges and things that have been brought against him, seems as if maybe he was flipped in prison or they saw in him a true believer. I mean, this guy was absolutely obsessed with the liberal world order. He comes across like a CNN, MSNBC addict where he's just totally convinced that if Ukraine loses this war, then democracy will fall, that type of rhetoric. So it's very hard to tell if he's just a lunatic or if he's a lunatic that they flipped to become an asset or if he's just putting on an act and he is in fact an asset. I don't know at this point, but very strange.
Wow. You mentioned the term memory hold.
Yes.
And this is something I've heard more recently. I wonder, just in the back of my mind, I don't know if you've ever seen the documentary Hypernormalization. And you got to watch it sometime. It's like what you were just saying, how it's hard to tell if the guy is an asset or a lunatic or somewhere in between. Or the documentary is about some of the psychological operations that Soviet Russia ran, largely under Putin, I believe.
What's it called again?
Hypernormalization.
All right, I'm going to watch that.
And one of the...
I think we're living through it.
Well, what was interesting about how effective it was is that he eventually hired this professor of theater or something like that. And his strategy was to just create so many things at once. They would commission the protest and they would commission the counter protest and they would commission the counter protest. And they were plugging in all these false people and it just basically creates so much confusion that people just go numb, right?
Yeah.
They just go numb, and then it enabled memory holing because there's so much shit hitting the news every day, right? Bad, horrible, confusing, and that it was easy to shuffle some of those things into, sweep them under the rug, so to speak.
I think that's exactly what we're dealing with.
And it seems like that strategy was so effective in Russia that other people are just copying it, something like that. Again, I'm not a professional in this area, so check out the documentary. I'm sure you'd know a lot more about it than me.
Yeah.
But my question is, what memory holing, at least I think it's kind of a new term that I've heard it more recently, at least. What does that say about the events that are getting memory holed? Are these things that then contradict whatever the established narrative is? And then if they come into the limelight of the news, the proverbial powers that be are trying to sweep this thing under the rug. Shouldn't that be a signal to us that we should pay more attention to the things that are, like, even with the Trump assassination attempt, the first one, I remember they weren't even calling it an assassination attempt, right? On some of the mainstream media outlets, they were calling it.
He fell during loud noises.
He fell during loud noises. And I guess that would be a preliminary effort to memory hole, right?
Yes.
You're just trying to call this thing something else to make it not worth the attention. What are your thoughts around memory holing? What signal does that send to us? How should we be thinking about things that people try to memory hole?
Yeah, I mean, to tie into that documentary you referenced and what the USSR was doing in terms of, it was basically psychological operations against their people.
Yeah.
In 2011, there was the Smith Modernization Act, which made it legal for the federal government to propagandize the American people. Prior to that, it had been illegal. And I think ever since then, we have been heavily propagandized by the federal government. So I think that memory holing is essentially a description for what we're dealing with, is that there is a very heavy, contrived narrative that we are supposed to all essentially abide by. And if you notice a major story that seems to just come up and disappear as if it was hardly a blip, particularly such a unbelievable visceral moment, like having a former president have a bullet graze his head, him bleeding, the fist pumping. I mean, the way I try and make people think about this and kind of get them, like, shake their mind up is, like, imagine for a second if that happened to Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Barack Obama, literally any other prominent politician.
Right.
It would be wall-to-wall coverage. We would have Patriot Act 2.0. They'd probably be seizing assault rifles.
Yeah.
And there would be congressional hearings. There was congressional hearings on the Trump attack, but it was kind of a blip. It went away very quickly.
Yeah.
I'm talking, after J6, we had years of hearings and wall-to-wall media coverage, and we were describing, all Trump supporters as these, radical domestic terrorists and all this madness. Nothing happens after 1 inch difference, and you have one of the most gruesome attacks we could have possibly imagined. So, my opinion is that anytime you see a major story like that does not get the coverage it deserves, it's because it is counter to the narrative that they are pushing. And perfect example of that, in my opinion, the first one that really jumps to mind is the Vegas shooting. If you remember, that couldn't have been a bigger story. 50 plus people killed. It was horrible. Yeah. And it was just like gone. And we have no motive, and it's totally bizarre. When you see something like that, you ought to dig deeper. That's all I think. Yeah,
we had Ian Carroll on. I think the episode drops this Friday. He was talking about the Vegas shooting, and there's a lot around that one, man. That one hit close to home because I lived there for 5 years, and I didn't know anyone, fortunately, that was affected directly, but second degree connections did,
of course.
And it was strange, man. Yeah, strange that even inside of this country, people didn't seem to know about it.
Right.
Even just a few weeks later, it's like, oh yeah, I heard something happened, but what was like one of the most brutal attacks on American soil that ever been, right? This guy's at the top of a building.
The largest.
The largest
mass casualty terrorist attack since 9/11.
Yeah, it killed, what was it, 50, 70, somewhere?
Yeah, people, I think it was 50 or 60. It was huge. And in terms of people that were also injured, it's massive.
Yeah.
But just think about how bizarre that is. Like, this is a guy who's basically a professional gambler which by the way, I had Ian Carroll on a couple months ago, and he can talk about all this stuff way deeper than I can. I love that guy.
Yeah.
But this guy's a professional gambler, has no motive whatsoever. Like to do this makes no sense at all. He's capable of bringing up literally dozens of assault rifles into this hotel room. I mean, and then he breaks out the glass. He's able to fire on these people basically unabated for over 10 minutes. I think it's some crazy amount of time. And this is Vegas. Like, Vegas.
Yeah.
Vegas is a security, like massive security zone because you have lots of money that's being moved around. So none of it adds up. And then you can go way deeper on this. Ian Carroll would really have the details on this, but you have the Saudi prince who's at the top floor. You have helicopter transponders that are going off and basically flying in darkness. And it just, there's something else there.
Yeah. And again, the signal, the fact that it gets swept under the rug should just indicate to us that there's something more to the story than we've been led to believe, basically.
Exactly.
And I guess that's maybe the general takeaway for all the memory holding, right? When you see something that's, the attempt to sweep it under the rug is a clear signal that there's something worth sweeping under the rug.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. It's something like the way I view it at this point, after doing a lot of research on these issues, is that when it's aggressively memory hold, like Vegas was, like both attacks on Trump have been, it's because it did not go according to plan. Like there's loose ends there that they don't want to be, tugged.
Right.
So I think that's the main reason, is that it's really damaging. If the truth about any of these issues comes out, it is extraordinarily damaging to the, scare quotes, powers that be.
Yes. Interesting. Do you think people are waking up quickly enough to these threats?
No.
I mean, no. Okay. So
definitely not.
Are we waking up at all? I guess it does seem to me like some people, largely thanks to the internet, I would say, do seem to be awakening to how vile and corrupt the existing political order is, not just in this state, but basically all states, as far as I can tell. Like, statism itself is a corrupt business, basically, right? It's the practice of coercion, compulsion, and violence for profit. So surprise, surprise, it's not very clean.
Right.
You said you don't think people are waking up fast enough. What can we do to help wake people up more quickly? Obviously, there's the education component, but is there something else we can be doing to shake the tree?
Probably not. And this is someone who, professionally tries to wake people up more aggressively. I think that there's, the people that are interested in the truth, that are interested in being woken up, are largely being woken up or have already been, and they are very much in the know. The issue is that the vast majority of people still aren't. I think it's probably 50-50 in terms of people that, like, they sense that something is amiss, something's gone awry, but they don't really have, it's kind of like the psychological operations that you were talking about earlier. Like, it's painful for them to follow this rabbit hole down and be like, wow, yeah, like, maybe we're not the good guys.
Yeah.
Maybe my government is in fact not looking out for my best interest or the best interest of the people of the world.
Yeah.
Like, that's a painful realization, especially for, I can speak to this for my conservative relatives, the ones that are like true blue, I bleed the American flag type of folks. Like, it hurts them. It hurts them viscerally to think that, like, wait, you think the federal government was involved in maybe trying to take out Trump? It's like, yeah, I think they took out JFK too. And RFK and a bunch of civil rights leaders. Like, so the reason I say that they're not waking up fast enough is just that, like, and this goes into the money side of things, but 35 trillion in national debt, and we're racking up $1 trillion every 3 or 4 months. I mean, this is totally unsustainable, and that's the reason that I'm most concerned with the time frame for people waking up. Is like it's just not happening fast enough. And I think it'll only, like, we'll hit the tipping point when the financial pain is, everywhere.
That's where I was just going to go with this, because you said obviously it's painful to take your mind down that rabbit hole to the realization that what you've been led to believe is untrue. You know, there's a lot of you're unplugging yourself from the Matrix, which is if you've seen the movie, it's not a fun realization when Neo first wakes up and sees what's really going on.
Right. Plug me back in.
Yeah, but so because that's painful, like maybe it's feels better to stay in the delusion, I guess, until the delusion becomes so painful.
Bingo.
Through inflation, taxation, war, whatever the thing is that people are like actually jolted from their sleep, I guess, into the reality of the situation. So that's a bleak perspective though, because that means we just have to go through the pain to get people to wake up.
I mean, human history kind of shows that, people don't really, come together and rise up in any meaningful way until it's very, very painful.
Yeah.
Because, and I think in some regards, it's a good thing because we want to remain peaceful and we want to, but my issue is that I think the only way you avoid violent revolution is peaceful revolution, and peaceful revolution has to come early.
Yeah.
Like you need people to really understand what's happening. They have to understand history. They have to know that if XYZ happens 3 to 5 years from then, you're in terrible conditions. And, like if you talk to we're in Miami, so you talk to a Cuban, refugee or an immigrant to America, they know what we're talking about.
Oh yeah.
They know.
Yeah. Right.
But most Americans don't.
Right.
They think, we're different, we're special. It can't happen here. And they're just wrong.
That's one of the things I do love about Miami. The red-blooded Americanness is real here. And it's not because they're even Americans. It's often because they're from these communist countries and they know the pain, frankly. So they know what we're fighting for here, to just keep the world, keep the city free, keep the state free, keep the government.
Exactly. I love Cuban migrants, some of the Russian ones too. I mean, Polish ones. I mean, they really don't like where things are headed.
Exactly. The farm at Okefenokee is a revolutionary new regenerative agricultural community. It features an 8,000 tree olive orchard, which they use to make their own olive oil, as well as a very large pecan orchard. All the animals on the farm are heritage animals, with some varieties over 100 years old and others thousands of years old. Fresh eggs are produced daily by the farm's chickens. Also, there are over 1,000 beehives that pollinate the over 200 heirloom fruits and vegetables and provide honey to all the residents. The farm makes its own molasses, unrefined sugar, herbs, and spices. The farm also features an herbal apothecary and a commercial kitchen. These are just a few reasons why the farm is the healthiest place on earth. To learn more about the healthiest place on earth, go to okefarm.com and use discount code BREEDLOVE for $21,000 off custom cabin pricing. Again, to learn more about the farm at Okefenokee, go to okefarm.com and be sure to tell them I sent you. Forget multivitamins and other supplements. Animal organs are the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. You can get 100 times more nutrients from organs than you can from muscle meats. But the problem with eating organs is that they are difficult to find in stores, they are difficult to prepare, and even when they are prepared well, they often don't taste great. Thankfully, Heart and Soil Supplements has made consuming organ meats so much easier by providing powderized organs in capsule form. Organ meats include everything your body needs to thrive: vitamins, minerals, peptides, proteins, and growth factors. This is why organ meats were the most prized foods for our ancestors. Fortunately for us, Heart and Soil makes these treasured foods easily accessible. So go to heartandsoil.co today and use discount code BREEDLOVE to get started on your journey to optimal health and vitality. Again, that's heartandsoil.co, discount code BREEDLOVE. Have you ever wanted to start a business in the Bitcoin space? If so, then the Wolf Startup Accelerator could be for you. Wolf is the first startup accelerator dedicated exclusively to businesses developing in the Bitcoin Lightning Network. 4 times each year, Wolf brings teams from around the world to New York City to work with like-minded entrepreneurs, pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. The program is designed to help early-stage companies achieve product-market fit, develop their brand, secure early stage funding, and grow businesses that fuel the global adoption of Bitcoin. Go to wolfnyc.com to learn more or apply today. Again, that's Wolf, WOLF, NYC.com. You're correct. If history is any indication that we do need to go through some significant pain before we start to see more people waking up. The difference, though, with today is the technological paradigm.
Right.
That's not going to change human nature per se, but it definitely changes the game dynamics a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think about modern digital technologies? I mean, obviously a tool can be wielded for good or evil purposes. We're seeing kind of both sides of that play out. I mean, you've got things like Bitcoin emerging, but then you have the countermeasure, which is the central bank digital currency, for instance, to name one such, good versus evil kind of dichotomy. How do you see the role of the internet, digital technologies, Bitcoin? Like, how do you see these things playing into the years ahead?
Oh, I mean, it's the main reason I'm optimistic, is technology. And yeah, Bitcoin's a big part of it, but also just the viral nature of media. I mean, I went from being a total unknown. I'm still not super well known, but I was a total unknown. I was a mortgage broker less than 5 years ago, to reaching hundreds of millions of people, annually, and sometimes monthly, depending on how my Twitter account does. So, like that, the advent of viral media and social media and things like that has made it so that the everyman can have really significant audiences. Yeah. And very rapidly so. Yeah. So I think that's reason for a lot of optimism. But going back to the Smith Modernization Act, I think the government saw that coming, because that was 11 or 12. That was right after social media really was created. And they're like, oh, we're going to have to be able to propagandize these people legally. There's no way we can let these people all just speak openly and honestly and freely, and we can't intervene. This is going to be disastrous for us. So I think that's exactly what happened. And now, particularly after during COVID, but then also after Russia invaded Ukraine, it became so evident to me that there is enormous bot networks that are being ran on social media to boost narratives, suppress narratives, sow discord, divide us. Very obvious to me. So I think that's all part of the negative too.
Yeah, there's a hope for, and this is a theoretical thing at this point, but there's a hope by Bitcoiners that we'll be able to build some type of uncensorable social media on top of Bitcoin.
Yep. I think it'll happen eventually.
Yeah, and that seems to be the only way out of this, because otherwise you're just going to have people fighting over the censorship authority and building bigger bot networks, and then that instigates the building of even bigger bot networks by the other side, and back and forth and back and forth. And before you know it, we're just awash in bullshit, right? Instead of actual human discourse, it's just all manufactured.
Yeah,
narrative.
It's a real danger.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's essentially what you were describing with the USSR. And that's where a lot of people, I mean, I don't think we're that bad, but we're not too far off. We're far closer to it than I think most people would like to acknowledge, that we are dealing with such, it's funny. It comes from the very people who won't shut the fuck up about mis and disinformation. They are the biggest propagators of it. Yeah. Professionally so. That's all they are doing 24/7 is trying to mis and disinform us.
Yeah. Yes.
Very frustrating.
Yeah. The only actual solution to mis or disinformation is open communication, right? So people can call you on your shit, present evidence, make arguments that contradict anything you say that is dis or misinforming. You can't say, it's like the censorship doesn't do that, because then you just create a fight to be in the position of the censor.
Exactly.
And then when the censor has the authority, well, then they can now run a narrative that pleases them or their compadres, right?
Yeah, well, exactly. And their perception is that, they will never not be in the role of being the censor. So for them, it's just 100% good. The issue is that history tells us they're not always going to be in the position of power. There are flips in the dynamic, and I don't know if Trump represents that or if he's kind of a controlled op figure. I can't really decipher that, but regardless, it's just like I wish I could sit down with like State Department reps or Nita Jankovic, the lady who's going to be in charge of like the mis and disinformation board in America, like the most Orwellian garbage I've ever seen in my life, and just talk to these people and just be like, do you understand what you're creating? Like, do you know? Do you care? Do you know like you're destroying like hard fought human liberty, like the thing that like the whole thing that really makes America special. And you view yourself as a patriot as you censor us? Like, do you understand what's wrong with what you're doing here?
Yes.
I just want to talk to them and see, like, are these people, like, do they know?
Yeah, the cult, it is surprising. And man, so many people have said this in so much more succinct and better ways. RFK said something like, you know, throughout history, the censors have never been the good guys.
Right.
Something like that. It's like, okay, you know, obviously that's a broad statement, but I think it's largely directionally correct. Like, even if someone censored something at one time that was maybe good, that once it's proven that that is an option, you know, the bad power will fill that vacuum eventually. Someone's going to take that position of censorship and use it for ill purposes, let's say.
I think even more profound, though, is that these censors throughout history have never thought they were the bad guy.
Yeah.
Because they also think that they're the good guy.
Right.
You know, so it's a total inversion of what RFK was saying, that like they've always been the bad guy. They've also never thought that they were.
Yes, yes. It's like a form of moral indignation or something. Yeah.
I mean, basically a belief that like your worldview I mean, this is the problem with like ideological rigidity in that just being 100% convinced that you are on the right side of history. Like
dogma.
Yeah, it's dogmatic. Exactly.
Yeah. The other thing that jumped to mind was, I mean, this is the essence of free speech, right? It's like, I might not support the contents of what you're saying, but I will always support your right to say it, because that doesn't make any sense. Like, if I don't like what you're saying, let me stop you from saying it. Well, then I've sawed off the branch on which I rest. Like, I don't actually, if I say I believe in free speech and then I censor someone, it's like my actions speak louder than my words. Right. I'm full of shit. Exactly. And yet that's what we see, right? We see the Ministry of Truth protecting democracy, protecting the freedom of speech through censorship. It's like, what? This doesn't hold up.
And I mean, this was anathema in American history. Like that would have been universally condemned all throughout the rest of my life up until just a few years ago.
Yeah.
You know, like basically 2020 was just this massive inversion in the psyche of Americans, where half of the country suddenly became convinced that, in fact, censorship was good.
Yes.
And that'll keep people alive.
Yeah.
And this is why I started my show's called Liberty Lockdown. You can tell I was very inspired by the lockdown era to get involved with this. It was a catastrophe. I mean, not just on financial levels, which it was catastrophic, and we still suffer the consequences of that today, and we will for a very long time. But really just the mental manipulation, like the psyops that were being ran during that period were extraordinary. I mean, they genuinely convinced people that, like, despite the fact that we now know that these figures were lying to us, the Anthony Fauci's of the world or the Deborah Birx of the world, like clearly lying. I could prove this to you. And they were essentially dictating what conversations we are allowed to have during an allegedly life-threatening pandemic. And no one's upset about that.
Yeah.
Like, that I'm trying to keep me and my, like, I think people have, this is another thing that's been memory hold. Like, that was such a catastrophe.
Yeah.
And we don't talk about it. There's really no adjudication of what transpired during that era. But it's like, it was absolutely vicious. And all of the people that were looked to as authority figures that were essentially dictating what conversations we could have on social media. I was suspended countless times. We now know that they were all lying. And they still walk free. And many of them, you know, are getting pensions from the taxpayer. It's sick.
It is truly sick. Although it feels like they're just playing to human nature very intelligently.
Agree.
Because I mean, if I just look in my own psyche, it's like, I don't want to think about that time. Like, it was so horrible. Like, I don't want to think about it. I don't want to talk about it. I want to move forward.
It's actually kind of healthy to move on.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if the people that are responsible for that are still in positions of power,
Right.
then you are in existential danger.
Yes, exactly.
So that's the reason that I harp on it. Not like I want to move on too.
No, you're right. No, you're absolutely right. My only point was like they use they use a deep knowledge of how the human psyche, memory, and all these things work, and they play it to their advantage. I mean, I guess that's obviously what you would do if you're running psyops all the time. You would.
They're very good at it.
Conform it to human psychology. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
Okay. How did we go from 1776 Americans, First Amendment, freedom of speech, and if you got a problem with that one, Second Amendment, right to bear arms. Exactly. Like everyone gets to say whatever they want, and we're going to enforce that physically, basically. Yep. How did we get from... I'm also seeing the memes, right? Was the Boston Tea Party, like the reaction to a 2% tax, and then today 50% tax in the US, and we're just like lollygagging. How did we go from, we'll call that the founding father mentality, I suppose, to whatever the fuck we are now? Like, is it just decadence and softening? Is this a conditioning thing? Is this have we been diluting our vitality? Does it have to do with the money printing in the Fed? Like what are the factors here?
Well, I think you nailed a bunch of them. I think the one that you didn't mention that I'll add is public schooling.
Yeah.
I think that was a catastrophe, because essentially now every child, or almost every child, 90% of kids for 100 years has been served up the same state propaganda.
Yeah.
And particularly over the past 10 to 15 years, it's gotten really stark that like they are propagandizing this generation to believe that, and I'll acknowledge that there's lots of pitfalls in American history, but like they have emphasized what makes America bad, and they've diminished all of the incredibly novel concepts that were at the foundational era of America. And I don't think that's an accident. I think that they want this upcoming generation to not value what makes America so special, and in fact to hate it for it. And that tells me that they are preparing, they're essentially seeding the ground for some sort of foundational change to how this country functions.
Like a one world government type thing.
Yeah. Something like I'm not sure exactly what the conclusion will be of that, but it's so obvious to me that that's where they're headed. Yeah,
it does feel like intuitively there are attacks from within and without on not the U.S. physically, but on the founding ethos of the United States, right? Like we have this attack on the freedom of speech. Obviously, there's been attacks on the Second Amendment forever, but they're intensifying, right. And it's something like the U.S. Constitution is like the Alamo for human freedom.
I agree, man.
And if you can collapse that, like, well, I don't think freedom of speech is as protected anywhere else in the world as it is here.
Right. And it's no longer very well protected here.
Right. And nor is the right to bear arms, nor is the percentage of gun ownership of the population. Like, there's a reason we're so free here. And that's the same reason I would argue we've been so economically successful.
Yes.
Because we were decentralized constitutional republic, low taxes, low and predictable taxes, stable rule of law, a lot of human freedom,
property rights,
property rights.
Yep.
Boom, right? Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, like most recent things that have emerged here. But those things are all under attack. So if you're one world government inclined, you need to stamp out the counterexample or demonize the counterexample before you can introduce yourself.
Exactly right. And now, I mean, you have all of the blessings of modern civilization, particularly in the U.S., is a product of everything you just described. Property rights. I won't go through the list. Like,
property rights, basically.
Property rights is kind of the summation of it. And that's like the number one thing that they're trying to undermine. I mean, again, going back to the lockdown era, they did a foreclosure and eviction moratorium that made it so that essentially property rights were abolished for over a year. That's what actually got me out of the mortgage industry, is that I was like, oh, this is in America. Like, if you stop paying on your loan and I can't foreclose for over a year, you have just robbed me.
Yeah, for a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or worse. I mean, depending on the conditions of the property, what the tenant does to it, like you're really damaging me. And I was just like, wow, this is not the America I knew. But anyways, I think that it's weird because I've always thought that like, yeah, America is special, but it's not that special. And like the more I read and study, I'm like, no, America is super fucking special.
Yeah.
Like unbelievably special. And I genuinely think that if we fall, the only pathway back to kind of the foundational concepts that made America so special is violence.
Yeah.
And that's the main reason I said earlier that I don't think people are waking up fast enough.
Yeah.
Is because I very much do not want to see the violent tumult that is necessary for human beings to throw off the shackles of tyranny. And it seems as if we are kind of barreling towards that.
Yeah. Well, amen to that. No one wants that outcome. Well, I shouldn't say no one. No peace-loving, freedom-loving individual wants that. But yeah, it does seem to be the direction we're headed. Do you want to give your kids a foundation of freedom and understanding of Bitcoin and a healthy skepticism of government? Then you should try Tuttle Twins. It's a cartoon about a grandma with a time-traveling wheelchair who takes her grandkids on hilarious adventures to learn about economics and freedom. Think the education of Magic School Bus meets the comedy of The Simpsons. With Tuttle Twins, your kids can learn about Bitcoin from Satoshi Nakamoto, civil disobedience from Harriet Tubman, natural rights from John Locke, and how to destroy the economy from Karl Marx. Today, Hollywood greenlights a lot of woke content or mindless garbage. Each episode of Tuttle Twins is parent-funded, parent-vetted, and only released when it's parent-approved. Because Tuttle Twins is fan-funded, it was the world's first kids show to teach about Bitcoin. That episode alone has been seen over 40 million times and was tweeted about by Michael Saylor. You can watch episodes of Tuttle Twins for free right now. And if you like what you see, you can use code BREEDLOVE for 10% off a subscription to the Angel Studios app and watch all of the episodes. So go to angel.com/breedlove to discover Tuttle Twins today. And remember to use code BREEDLOVE for 10% off. One of my highest health priorities is keeping my brain in top shape. To take care of my brain power, I do many things, such as striving to read, write, exercise, and meditate daily. One of the latest tools in my brain power toolkit is MindLab Pro. MindLab Pro is a nootropic supplement that is scientifically proven to enhance your brain power. When I take MindLab Pro, my mind feels like it has a better grip on the world, my thinking is more lucid, and the articulation of my speech is radically improved. MindLab Pro has been tested in rigorous, double-blind, placebo-controlled human trials and has been proven to enhance brain power for users in every age group. MindLab Pro is an advanced formulation of 11 nootropic ingredients and is backed by research from over 1,400 human trials conducted over the past 32 years. So if you're looking to enhance your brain power, MindLab Pro is an excellent solution. Go to mindlabpro.com/breedlove to start enhancing your brain power today. Again, that's mindlabpro.com/breedlove. Before starting the What is Money show, I spent most of my career as a CFO, overseeing internal technology implementations and business acquisitions. Over the next 10 years, it is projected that over 12 million businesses in the US will be sold. If you are an operator running a business generating between $5 and $200 million of revenue, and you're considering selling your business within the next decade, then there is a significant opportunity for you to deploy technology to streamline business processes, reduce operating costs, and enhance the multiple your business ultimately sells for. To this end, I am partnering with the team at Emerge Dynamics, a firm with decades of experience in maximizing the value of privately held small and middle market businesses. Go to emergedynamics.com/breedlove to learn how you can build an attractive, high multiple company that maximizes your return when you fully exit. Again, that's emergedynamics.com/breedlove. Can we talk about the Fed and the money printing? Because I mean, I might be the hammer that everything looks like a nail to, but it does seem to me like things really started to go off the rails in 1913 with the inception of the Federal Reserve, and then accelerated like crazy after 1971, going off the gold standard, that when you give a central government the power to print money, especially when it's not backed by gold, they can literally just print as much money as they want. It's not that big of a surprise that we saw all these three-letter agencies started to grow ridiculously fast, right? And we saw a disproportionate shift in the growth of federal, state, or central state power, and a decrease in local state power. So in short, what would I say? The money printer is a centralizing force on the state. And that is almost synonymous with the destruction of the US, because the US was founded as a decentralized constitutional republic, right? Powerful local states, weak local central government. And the money printer flips that on its head. Now, talking about this 10 years ago, people didn't give a shit, right? They didn't know the term fiat currency.
Right.
Maybe 15 years ago, I guess I should say. Bitcoin's 15 years old now.
Right.
After Bitcoin and after all the money printing and after the 2008 and 2020 and all these financial calamities we've had, it's starting to become a topic that people talk a little bit more about. We even have Thomas Massey, who's now introducing legislation to, I think, abolish the Federal Reserve.
Mm-hmm.
What are your views on the role of money printing, central banking, and all of this mess that we find ourselves in? Is there a political solution to this problem, a la what Massey is doing? If not, what other solutions are available?
Yeah, I mean, well, just to go to kind of the premise of the question, I completely agree with your analysis that it is really the source of all that ails. Mm-hmm. I mean, from 1913, we go from one of the smallest federal governments for the land mass in particular, mm-hmm. and the wealth that we were producing, to the largest government in human history. And like that happens pretty rapidly. Mm-hmm. About 100 years, we become the biggest government ever.
Yeah.
We also become the largest military ever and probably the most successful empire ever. But all empires end, and they end in the same fashion usually, that it is either you lose in a catastrophic war or you lose because your currency dies.
Yeah.
And it seems as if we are on the precipice of both, which is super concerning, because the difference is that there wasn't nuclear weaponry with prior empire declines, whereas this one, there's lots of nations that don't like us, and they got nukes and we've got nukes, and we're all pointed at each other, and we're in fact in a proxy war with one of them right now, if not two of them. So it's super duper dangerous. Sorry, I keep taking this into dark territories, but I mean,
that's what it is.
It's just true. So as far as political solutions to the money printing issue, there's really no popular support for doing what needs to be done. Trump, I like Trump a lot more than I do the current regime, but I'm not a sycophant by any stretch of the imagination. What he did in his big, beautiful bill, the $4 or $5 trillion that they spent in 2020 that he bragged about. Look, there is no fiscal sanity coming from either side of the aisle.
Right.
And if there was a figure that has enough kind of just diehard supporters that whatever he said would probably end up getting enough support to happen, it would be Donald Trump. He doesn't seem to understand the dire nature of our financial circumstances.
Yeah.
He has made his money by borrowing and and spending in that fashion, and I think that he thinks you can do that as a country too, and he's not right. Particularly because we don't borrow and then put into any sort of tangible assets. We just put it into bombs and then we blow them up. So it's like, exactly. That's not getting us anywhere. So, I mean, in terms of political solutions, no, I think that it's a personal solution. Like you can opt out.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people that understand what's going on have and are continuing to do so. So I think that's the answer. Unfortunately, I genuinely don't think that people are going to demand the change that's necessary until the inflationary pressures, which are already significant, get far, far worse.
Yeah. When you say opt out, you mean going into putting your purchasing power in gold or Bitcoin and taking it out of the system?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I tend to agree. And that the beauty of that is like you can not only protect yourself, but it's also an act that takes energy out of that machine.
True.
You're like voting against the printing of money and the dropping of bombs, for instance, just by saying, you know what, you can do that, but you're not going to do that to my purchasing power, right? You're not going to dilute me to bomb other people. Like, fuck that.
Yeah, it's a great act of protest.
Yeah, boycotting, basically boycotting the state in a way. But man, how do we? Like, that is one of the most effective things we can do. Probably the most effective thing we can do, next to just
on an individual level,
and education. Yeah. Yet so few people understand that. It's not that complicated. I mean, we just said it in 2 sentences. So, like,
right.
what's the problem? Was it just that money and finance is just this abstract domain that people don't have their heads around? Like, how do we get people to see the economic picture for what it is?
Yeah, look, I mean, let's just be honest. Most people aren't libertarians. Most people are not going to read Austrian economics. You know, they're not going to go down, this road. And in their defense, they've spent their entire childhood being told that we're wrong, that Keynesianism is actually proper and good, and if not, then modern monetary theory is the is the pathway forward. So I don't think you can reach a lot of these people, and like I've just kind of accepted that at this point. Like I think that in fact I'm very confident that they're wrong, and I know that we will all suffer as a consequence of their wrongheadedness. However, you have so many people that are telling them that they're right and that we're idiots that it's like, all right, what else can I do? You know, like I can try and convince them, but for the most part, it's like there's nobody home.
Dude, that one's such a pernicious problem because you go back to public schooling, actually.
Exactly.
Like, people have been actually conditioned to believe that this is the truth of finance economics. And then when this is one of the most bitter parts of the Bitcoin orange pill. You pull back the veil on Keynesian economics and you're like, what? This is all pseudoscientific bullshit to justify the money printing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yet it's taught in all universities.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And so everyone's plugged into this matrix, basically, unless, there's like when I say a handful, literally a handful, I think less than 5 universities in the world that are seriously teaching Austrian economics. Now, obviously the game has changed with the internet and all of that, but
but see, here's the thing. When it comes to like high level educational topics, which despite the fact that finance is not really looked at in that way, it ought to be. I mean, because it's one of the most important things. But when you're going to these schools, these colleges, these universities, very high level universities to learn about economics, like you're going to come away totally convinced that you have to be being told the right thing. Yeah. Like if you go to NYU or whatever, and like you're telling me that the people at the highest levels of American academia are wrong. Like I'm just trying to like steel man the opposition here. Like for a young person who knows no better,
right? Of course,
and they go to this high end college and they pay $250,000 to go there, and then we come out of here and we're just like, everything you think is wrong, and they're like, "Fuck you." So I understand the psychology.
With a camera and a book, and we're like, "Oh yeah, you're the one that's right compared to these."
Exactly.
I can commend that as well, but I do think that whole, what do we call this, like worshiping of the expert or something, that was really challenged during COVID.
It should have been.
Yeah, thankfully. But
this is technocracy. I mean, there's financial technocracy too.
Yeah. What do you think the most egregious lies that have been told to the American public? What are some of these that you think over the past few years that are maybe even ones that are still considered widely held to be truths?
Yeah. Oh man, there's a lot. To keep it safe, I'll say the first one that came to mind instantly was safe and effective.
Yeah, of course.
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Trust the science.
Yes. But I think that entire era, I think that obviously is very profound and super important. But I think that the one that we face that's happening now is that you can have a conventional war between nuclear powers. That is an absolute lie. We understood that throughout the decades of the Cold War, that if you ever have a hot war between Russia and America, or the USSR and America, it means the end of life on Earth. And I think it still means that. And there is a massive movement all over the world, from basically the entire NATO alliance to persuade, read psychologically manipulate the people of the world to think that you can in fact have a conventional war between NATO and Russia. They ain't going out like that.
Yeah.
I do not understand like this incredibly high stakes game of chicken where the consequences if they're wrong is the end of humanity.
Right.
And we're not having that discussion.
Right.
I think it's an unbelievable travesty on a scale I can't even really put into words that'll drive it across to your audience. It's like how important this fucking thing is. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
How in the flying fuck could anyone be convinced that a war between two nuclear powers could not escalate to nuclear exchange? How I don't understand what argument would almost in that sentence. It's like by definition, if they're nuclear powers, what's the old saying? All is fair in love and war. You don't think the nuclear power is at some point of the escalated conflict going to resort to nuclear force?
Right.
And you don't think if one country uses nuclear force that the target of that nuclear force is not going to retaliate similarly? Like what logic can be brought to bear on that?
All you have to do is flip the circumstances and say, if it was happening to America, do you think that we would go down without turning to nukes?
Of course.
We would use the nukes.
Yeah.
You know that they would. Yeah. 100% they would.
Yeah.
If
we use the nukes without having that
exactly.
Yeah.
There was no existential threat to America and we used nuclear weapons. I mean, the difference, obviously, during that junction is we were the only ones with them.
Yeah.
So we could actually do so. As soon as there was other countries, and now there's lots of countries that have nuclear weapons, it basically took them off the table as, first strike capacity and all this stuff. But now you have, Zelensky has advocated multiple times in this 2.5-year long war to first strike Russia. And I'm like, dude, there is no first strike. What are you fucking talking about? Like as soon as you launch,
first
they
strike
know
is the last strike.
Yeah, they launch too. That's how it goes down. Everybody knows this. They have war gamed this a million times at the State Department. Like, they know, or I should say, Department of Defense. They all know. So it's just a lie. It seems as if it's a bluff. Putin's trying to call ours. We're trying to call his, and it's just like at some point, particularly if Russia is going to lose this war, which I don't think they're going to, but say they actually bring in NATO troops into Western Ukraine to try and push the Russians out of the East. I think there's a distinct possibility that Putin, trying to once again call our bluff, launches a low-yield nuclear warhead somewhere, maybe not on, a city or anything crazy, but it's crazy to use a nuke, period. But I'm saying he does it as a signal, like, look, I am not playing.
Yeah.
And then what is the response from NATO? And I don't know what they'll do. This is the trap that everybody knows exists with kind of this nuclear brinksmanship.
Yeah.
And we're just playing with it without any public debate. Like that's the thing that disturbs me most. There was like wall-to-wall coverage when you had the Cuban Missile Crisis. Like it was the biggest story in the world because everybody understood what was on the line. We have been basically in a 2+ year Cuban Missile Crisis, and we don't even talk about it. And I just think that's a catastrophe.
So would it be fair to say that you were concerned that the prospect of mutually assured destruction is not being taken seriously enough?
Yes, exactly.
Is this another thing where we've just become desensitized to it because it's been around for so long? Like, is this another thing where we need to feel the pain of fucking nuke going off somewhere before
well, let's hope not. There are, like, in fairness, there are a lot of people that understand the risks that we're facing, and I'll actually be in DC this weekend to do a rally, like End the Wars rally on Saturday, and then a Defend the West rally with RFK Jr. and Tulsi and a whole bunch of people.
Well, that's Brett Weinstein's thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, very cool.
So that'll be awesome.
Yeah, I wish you much success with that, but it's like
we need it.
What the hell, man? What is this impulse in us that this war mongering thing? Like what? It's so frustrating to me because I think maybe this is the libertarian, because the libertarian knows the more peace, the more population even, stronger the property rights, the greater the division of labor, the greater the prosperity we all experience.
Yeah. Such a simple recipe.
Yeah, but this other like Malthusian flavored technocratic utopian site like thinks we need to control population, shrink population.
Right.
And it's like that actually creates the opposite of everything good in life. Like literally less peace, less trust, less goods, less prosperity.
Yep. And
shorter lives, lower standards of living. Like the list goes on and on and on. It's just literally like one dark path or the light path.
Right.
Why can't we just
go towards the light?
Yeah. What's going on, man?
I mean, this is something I've struggled with a lot because I've never been a religious figure. I've always been agnostic, and it does feel very good versus evil-y.
Yeah.
It does, man.
Yeah.
When you're up against people that think that there's too many human beings.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how you conclude anything other than like, oh, these people are, that's misanthropes.
Yeah.
Like, they don't like humans.
Right.
And I love humanity, and I want to see more of us, and I want to see more peace and prosperity and all those things. So I think that's kind of the easy dividing line between, what side of this fight are you on?
Yes.
But yeah, it's bizarre that so many people want less of us.
Yeah. And that's a psychological disease, right? Especially if you're a living human and you're saying, I think we need less humans. It's like, well, why are you still here?
Yeah.
Why are you living and breathing? What you're actually saying, like your actions again speak louder than your words. You're saying, I think we need less of you.
Yes.
Right. That's what if you translate it properly.
Right. If you listen to Yuval Noah Harari, he's very, very famous for this type of talk. And it's like I don't see you opting out.
Yeah, exactly.
I think there's just an obvious elitism that comes with that mentality. Like, no. There's useless eaters, and then there's me. The technocratic elite that ought to be dictating who stays and who goes.
The hubris.
Right.
So is that maybe the core of this is the hubris?
That's part of it, for sure.
Yeah.
It's very hard for me to put myself in that mindset.
Yeah.
It's very foreign to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I try to look at it from a human perspective, and, even those that do great evil often think they're doing good. So it's typically more like they have, what we used to have, eugenics and things like this, right? Like the eugenicists thought they're doing good for the human race, ostensibly. I'm not sure. At least that's how they sold it. But obviously that's not a thing, all right? It's very unethical and immoral to artificially breed people for certain outcomes. And it also contradicts natural selection, which we actually don't know what we're going to need to adapt to. Hence the indispensability of human freedom, right? You need to leave people free to adapt to the unknown, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
And so I try to approach it like, all right, what's the actual good that they think they're doing here? But I feel like maybe it's just this economic ignorance, this deep economic ignorance.
Yeah. Scarcity mindset, that like, from my vantage point, I think from a more healthy outlook is that like the more people there are, the more minds there are to solve the problems that we face. And therefore that produces the best outcomes. So I would like to see more people, not less.
Yes.
But they have the completed inverted mentality. I think it kind of goes back to communism and how like, no matter how many times it fails, like, well, we'll get it right this time. And I think that's kind of how the eugenics school of thought works too. It's like, it's a really bad idea, but it's defeated. It rears its ugly head again, and it's kind of cyclical.
Yeah, so I guess we're just always going to be dealing with our dark side, and then the fight. A
little bit.
The fight is in the psychological space to determine. I'm actually a really optimistic guy.
I tend to be
in general. Yet I don't know how the content on this show often drifts into the darkness. But
I think it's just like
looking at
reality.
Looking at reality.
Yeah, it's we're going through a tough time.
Yes, indeed. But humans are resilient. We're strong. We're adaptive. We've been through, literally, that's all of human history is us going through tough times. So we can get through this. I would like to leave it on a high note of sorts. So given everything that we've talked about, given all of the problems that we face, but also given the new opportunities that are available, I guess, largely in the domain of technology, right? That we do have new means to pursue our ends, let's say. What gives you hope for the future? What is the positive outlook or spin we can put on all this?
Yeah. Well, look, I think that like there has never been a better time to actually get the truth out there.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's unbelievable the reach that everybody can have potentially. So I am definitely not without hope. Like I think that there are millions and millions of people that are waking up every single year that are understanding exactly how deep this rabbit hole goes and how much deceit that they've languished under their entire lives. And I think that process is basically like, it doesn't revert. Like you don't go back to bed.
Right.
So I think we will hit a tipping point at some point. The concern I have is, what is the consequence of that tipping point? How do people actually react? Like once we have a majority that can dictate terms, what will they dictate, and will it be allowed peacefully? And I think that it just comes down to, are the numbers so significant that essentially our will be done without violence? And I think that there's a possibility of that. So that's what I'm striving towards, because that's the outcome I desire most. And God willing, I say this as a agnostic person, that will be the outcome. I think that like it's almost inevitable in some regard, but in the interim, it is not at all inevitable that we will actually like get through this period.
Yeah.
So I think that like what's most important is that kind of a triage of what we face is that we have to diffuse the situation against Russia. Like that needs to be and this is why I'm coming together with a bunch of, former Democrats and things like that this weekend to try and make that come about. Because I think if we can avoid that, if we can avoid a world war, I'm very optimistic after that. But we've got to get that part done. We've got to get that part. We got to get that one answered correctly. And I think everything else can kind of fall into place. Like the technological advancements, they're probably not going away unless there's nuclear war.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think that there's like the odds of there being a world war or nuclear war are still relatively low, but they are increasing. So I just think it's kind of like, all right, all hands on deck, no black pilling, be hopeful, be optimistic, be active, and as a collective group of individualist-minded people, I think we can accomplish a lot.
That sounds good, and it sounds like staving off war then is the primary concern, because that's what disrupts all of that possibility, basically. Maybe not all of it, but it definitely puts
Big chunk.
Big chunk. You said you're an agnostic man, but you also said God willing.
Yeah. I go back and forth.
Do we need something beyond rationality, like some type of, I don't know, revolution in human consciousness or something? Like, religion has kind of given us this fabric of love and wisdom to connect people historically. Do we need something to replace that, or do we need to return to that, or does that play a role in the, let's say, the path toward the light?
Yeah. I think it obviously matters. I don't know to what extent, because it hasn't been a huge role in my life, but I think it's quite evident throughout human history that this has been a very foundational core belief that creates positive civilizations. So I think it's necessary again. I really do. And it's hard for me to admit that, but it seems kind of obvious at this point. Like, we need God or something thereabout.
Yeah, if it is a good versus evil struggle, you need something really good to point at, right? So, Clint, man, thank you for making the trip.
Absolutely.
Great to see you in person again.
It was a pleasure.
I think we're going to have Luke on sometime soon, so hopefully I can join you guys again. Although your guys' conversation, man, you guys are just in another league. I can't...
We go all over the place.
Yeah. You guys know all about, a lot of these topics that I don't follow closely, but it was super interesting to be with you last time. So I appreciate you making the trip down.
Absolutely. If anybody wants to check out my stuff, Liberty Lockdown.
Liberty Lockdown. And is that your Twitter handle too?
At Liberty Lockpod on X. I do the Best Political Show with Luke 3 nights a week on Rumble. It's crazy. If people want kind of a fun spin on some of these more grave topics, they can find us there.
Awesome, man. We'll put all that in the show notes, and thank you again for joining me.
Anytime, man. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.